Commander Valthera pressed her clawed hand against the bleeding wound on her side, watching the thick green liquid seep between her fingers. The escape pod shuddered around her, its hull scarred and blackened from the plasma burns that had torn through her flagship just hours before. Through the small porthole, she could see the last glimmer of her fleet's engines as they vanished into the swirling vortex of hyperspace, leaving her alone in the endless darkness of the void. The Separatist attack had come without warning. One moment, the Corvian Defense Fleet was conducting routine patrol sweeps along the Outer Rim territories. In the next, enemy vessels had materialized from behind the asteroid field like deadly phantoms. The Sovereign, her mighty dreadnought, had taken the brunt of the assault. Valthera could still hear the screams of her crew echoing through the corridors as bulkheads collapsed in plasma. Fires raged through the ship's vital systems. She had been on the bridge when the final torpedo struck. The explosion had hurled her across the command deck, her body slamming into the tactical console with bone-crushing force. Through the smoke and chaos, she had seen her second-in-command, Lieutenant Kethmer, dragging her toward the escape pod bay. His face had been grim with determination. Even as the ship's automated systems announced the inevitable countdown to core breach. The pod's emergency beacon flickered weakly on the control panel, its red light casting strange shadows across her. Reptilian features. Valthara's people, the Corvians, had evolved on a harsh desert world where survival meant making difficult choices. Their scaled skin could withstand extreme temperatures, and their dual hearts pumped efficiently even in oxygen environments. But even her hardy physiology had limits, and she could feel her strength ebbing away with each labored breath. The life support system wheezed and rattled, struggling to maintain atmospheric pressure. According to the readings she had maybe 5 hours of breathable air remaining, possibly less if the recycling filters continued to malfunction. The pod's water supply was contaminated with coolant from the damaged systems, and the emergency medical kit contained only basic supplies insufficient for her severe injuries. Valthera activated the communication array with trembling fingers. Knowing that protocol demanded she make the attempt, even though hope was futile. The Galactic Council's military doctrine was clear and unforgiving. Damaged vessels were considered security risks, potential sources of classified information that could fall into enemy hands. No rescue would come. No ship would risk exposure. To save a single life when the greater good was at stake, says Commander Valthera of the KDF Sovereign. She spoke into the transmitter, her voice steady, despite the pain that lanced through her chest with each word. Serial number 77 Alpha Nin Delta. I'm broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. My escape pod is critically damaged, life support failing. I have sustained severe injuries and require immediate medical assistance. Any vessel receiving this transmission, please respond. The silence that followed was absolute and crushing. Stars wheeled slowly past the porthole, distant suns that had burned for billions of years and would continue burning long after her bones had turned to dust. She tried the transmission again, varying the frequency and power levels, but the result was the same. The void offered no mercy, no reprieve from the harsh mathematics of survival that had governed galactic civilization for countless generations. Valthara had seen this scenario play out many times during her 30-year military career. Ships would receive distress signals from damaged vessels. The response was always the same: maintain safe distance, monitor the situation, but never intervene. The risks were too great, the potential for ambush too high. Better to let one individual perish than to endanger an entire crew. It was logical, practical, and utterly merciless. Her thoughts drifted to her homeworld of Corvus Prime, where the twin suns blazed down on endless dunes of crystalline sand. She remembered her childhood in the military academy, where instructors had drilled into young cadets the fundamental truth of galactic existence. Resources were finite. Trust was a luxury that civilizations could not afford. An individual, lives were expendable when measured against the survival of the species. The pod's emergency rations consisted of 3 protein bars and a small container of electrolyte solution. Valthera knew she should conserve them, but hunger gnawed at her empty stomach. She had not eaten since the previous day, and her body needed fuel to heal from the trauma of the attack. She broke open one of the bars, chewing the tasteless substance slowly while reviewing her options. The navigation system was damaged beyond repair, leaving her with no way to determine her exact position. The pod's minimal thrust capability would not be enough to reach the nearest inhabited system. The emergency beacon's range was limited to perhaps a few light hours. She was trapped in a metal coffin, drifting helplessly through the cosmic dark. Outside the porthole, a meteor shower painted brief streaks of light across the star field. Valthera watched the celestial display with detached fascination, finding strange beauty in the burning fragments of ancient rock. Each meteor was like a tiny life, blazing brilliantly for a few seconds before fading into nothingness. That was all any existence amounted to. A brief flicker of consciousness in an indifferent universe. The pod's internal temperature was dropping steadily as the heating systems struggled to compensate for the damaged hull. Valthera pulled the emergency blanket tighter around her shoulders, but the thin material provided little warmth. Her breath began to form small clouds in the increasingly frigid air, and she knew that hypothermia would claim her long before the oxygen ran out. She activated the pod's data recorder, determined to leave some account of the battle for future historians. Her words echoed in the cramped confines as she described the separatist attack, the loss of her ship, and the abandonment that followed. It was a story that would likely never be heard, a voice crying out in the wilderness of space, but she felt compelled to tell it nonetheless. As the hours passed, Valthera's condition deteriorated rapidly. The wounds on her side had reopened, and her vision blurred from blood loss and oxygen deprivation. She found herself drifting in and out of consciousness, her mind wandering through half-remembered dreams of home and family. The cold was becoming unbearable, seeping into her bones and making her thoughts sluggish and confused. The emergency beacon continued its futile broadcast, sending out its automated distress signal to an empty universe. Valthera closed her eyes and prepared for the inevitable, knowing that the cold pragmatism of galactic civilization would claim another victim. In the vast expanse of space, one life meant nothing at all. The bridge of the Terran exploration vessel Horizon hummed with quiet activity as Captain Lee Soo-jin reviewed the morning reports from her department heads. The ship had been traveling through this sector for 3 weeks, mapping star systems and cataloging planetary resources for the growing human colonies. It was routine work, but Soo-jin found satisfaction in expanding humanity's knowledge of the galaxy. One system at a time, Communications Officer Park Min-ho sat at his station, monitoring the various frequencies that carried traffic between distant worlds. His headset crackled with the usual mix of commercial transmissions, navigation beacons, and automated weather reports. Then something different caught his attention, a signal that made him sit up straighter in his chair. "Captain Min-ho!" called out, his voice cutting through the bridge's ambient noise. "I'm picking up what appears to be a distress signal. It's unusual." Clicking against the metal deck plating, the signal was faint and intermittent, filled with static and strange harmonic frequencies that their equipment struggled to process. "What's unusual about it?" Minho's fingers flew across his control panel, adjusting filters and amplification settings. The language patterns are completely unknown. The vocal structure suggests a non-human origin, but the universal translator is having difficulty making sense of it. The signal is definitely a distress call, though. Can hear the desperation in the voice. Lieutenant Commander Kim Hae-won approached from the security station, her expression serious. As the ship's chief of security, she had seen enough hostile encounters to know that caution was essential in situations like this. "Captain, we need to consider the possibility that this is a trap. Unknown alien species could be using false distress signals to lure unsuspecting vessels into ambush situations." Science Officer Dr. Choi Dong-wook joined the growing cluster of officers around the communications console. His scanner readings showed energy signatures that matched no known technology in their databases. "The signal is coming from approximately 2 light hours away. Based on the transmission patterns, it appears to be originating from a small craft, possibly an escape pod or emergency vessel." Soo-jin studied the data streaming across the displays. The signal was weak and getting weaker, suggesting that whatever was broadcasting it was running low on power. The voice that emerged from the static sounded tired and desperate, repeating the same phrases over and over in an alien tongue that their computers could only partially decode. Translation matrix is showing 73% confidence in. Basic meaning, Minho reported. The being is identifying itself as a military commander. It's requesting immediate assistance and stating that life support systems are failing. Estimated survival time based on signal degradation is approximately 4 hours. Navigator Li Sungguan plotted the coordinates on the main display. Captain, if we alter course now, we can reach the distress signal's origin point in 2 hours and 47 minutes. That would give us minimal time for rescue operations before the alien systems fail completely. Kim Hae-won crossed her arms, her tactical training demanding that she voice her concerns. Captain, first contact protocols are very clear about situations like this. We should maintain safe distance and attempt communication before taking any direct action. We know nothing about this species, their technology, or their intentions. They could be hostile, could be technologically superior. This could be an elaborate trap designed to capture human vessels. The ship's artificial intelligence system activated its speakers, delivering its calculated assessment in a calm, emotionless voice. Analysis of available data suggests a 67% probability of hostile encounter. Recommend maintaining safe distance and monitoring the situation. Direct intervention carries significant risk to crew safety and mission parameters. Sujin listened to the arguments, but her attention kept returning to the alien voice crackling through the speakers. Despite the language barrier, she could hear the pain and fear in those strange syllables. Someone was dying out there in the cold darkness of space, and they were calling for help. Dr. Choi, she said, turning to the science officer, You tell me about the alien's condition based on the signal analysis? The scientist consulted his instruments, cross-referencing the data with medical databases. Based on vocal stress patterns and transmission irregularities, the being appears to be severely injured. Breathing patterns suggest respiratory distress, possibly due to oxygen deprivation or internal injuries. The signal is also showing signs of hypothermia. The voice is becoming increasingly slurred and incoherent. Engineer Otahein had been quietly monitoring the technical aspects of the alien transmission. Captain, their technology appears to be compatible with our rescue systems. Escape pod is using standard emergency frequencies and power signatures that our equipment can interface with. If we can get close enough, we should be able to extract the occupant. Sujin looked around at her crew, seeing the conflict in their faces. Logic and protocol demanded caution, but their shared humanity urged them to act. She thought about the oaths she had taken when accepting command of the horizon to protect life, to explore peacefully, and to represent the best of human values among the stars. Kim, I understand your concerns about security, she said, her voice steady and determined. But we can't just let someone die when we have the power to save them. It's not who we are as humans. We don't abandon people in need, regardless of their species or origin. The security chief's expression softened slightly. Captain, I'm not suggesting we abandon them. I'm just saying we need to be careful. We could send a probe first, gather more information, establish better communication protocols. There's no time for that, Sujin interrupted. By the time we complete all the proper procedures, this being will be dead. Sometimes you have to trust in the fundamental decency of other sentient species. Sometimes you have to take risks to do what's right. She turned to address the entire bridge crew. I know this goes against standard protocols. I know it's dangerous. But I also know that we'll never forgive ourselves if we let someone die when we could have saved them. We're explorers, not just mappers of empty space. We're ambassadors for humanity, and this is our chance to show the galaxy what we stand for. Minho adjusted his equipment one final time, the alien's voice growing weaker with each transmission. Captain, signal strength is dropping rapidly. If we're going to act, it has to be now. Sujin returned to her command chair, her decision made. All departments prepare for emergency rescue operations. Navigation, plot an intercept course at maximum safe speed. Engineering, ready the rescue equipment and prepare for unknown alien physiology. Medical. Stand by to receive a critically injured patient of unknown species. We're going in. The bridge erupted into controlled activity as the crew prepared for humanity's first rescue mission in deep space. The rescue operation had been more challenging than anyone on the horizon had anticipated. When they finally located the alien escape pod drifting in the vast emptiness of space, it was barely functional. The hull was cracked and leaking atmosphere, and the life support systems had failed completely. Through the small viewing port, they could see the unconscious form of the alien commander, her scaled skin taking on a dangerous blue-gray color from oxygen deprivation. Engineer Otehun had worked quickly to establish a docking connection. Between the human ship and the failing pod, the alien technology was surprisingly compatible with their systems. But the pod structure was so damaged that they had to cut through sections of twisted metal to reach the occupant. Every second counted as they carefully extracted the wounded being and rushed her to the medical bay. Dr. Yoon, Ji-hai had been preparing for this moment since Captain Lee gave the order to begin rescue operations. The medical bay had been cleared of all non-essential personnel, and she had assembled her best team to handle what would certainly be the most unusual case of her career. As the alien was brought in on a stretcher, Ji-hai's first impression was of a being that was both familiar and completely foreign. Velthara was humanoid in basic structure, but clearly evolved from different evolutionary pressures. Her skin was covered in fine scales that shifted from deep green to pale yellow, depending on the angle of light. She had 2 hearts, which Ji-hai discovered when her medical scanners detected the dual cardiac rhythms. Her respiratory system was more complex than human lungs, with additional chambers that seemed designed to extract oxygen from thin atmospheres. Start with basic life support, Ji-hai instructed her team as they connected monitoring equipment. To the alien's body, her breathing is irregular, and those wounds on her torso are severe. We need to stop the bleeding first, then worry about everything else. Nurse Choi Sejin worked alongside the doctor, her steady hands checking vital signs and adjusting the oxygen flow. The alien's blood was a thick, dark green fluid that clotted differently than human blood. Their standard medical supplies were not designed for this type of physiology, so they had to improvise with what they had available. Doctor, her body temperature is dropping rapidly, Sejin reported. The heating blankets aren't working effectively because of her scaled skin. We need to find another way to warm her up. Otahayan had remained in the medical bay to help modify their equipment for the alien patient. He worked quickly to adjust the heating elements and create a warming chamber that would work with her unique biology. I'm redirecting power from the secondary systems to boost the heating capacity. This should help bring her temperature back to normal levels. The most challenging aspect of treating Velthara was her blood chemistry. The synthetic blood substitutes that worked perfectly for humans were being rejected by her system, causing dangerous reactions that made her condition worse. Ji-hai had to analyze samples of the alien's blood to understand its composition and create a compatible replacement. We need to get creative here, she told her team. Her blood carries oxygen differently than ours. The hemoglobin equivalent seems to be based on copper compounds rather than iron. We'll have to synthesize a substitute using the ship's chemistry lab. Word of the rescue had spread throughout the ship, and crew members began arriving at the medical bay with offers of assistance. Some brought additional medical supplies from their personal kits. Others volunteered to donate blood for testing, even though it would likely be incompatible with the alien system. The engineering department worked around the clock to modify equipment and create new medical devices. Lieutenant Park Min-ho had been working with the ship's computer to analyze the alien's language patterns from her distress calls. He created a basic translation program that could convert simple phrases between their languages. When Velthara began to regain consciousness, he was ready to help establish communication. The alien's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first as her brain struggled to process what she was seeing. Ji-hai had expected her to be frightened or confused, but instead, Velthara seemed surprised by something else entirely. She looked around the medical bay, taking in the clean white walls, the humming equipment, and the concerned faces of the humans caring for her. Where am I? She whispered in her own language, the words automatically translated by Min-ho's program. You're aboard the human vessel Horizon, Ji-hai replied gently. speaking slowly so the translator could convert her words. You were badly injured in your escape pod. We found you drifting in space and brought you here for medical treatment. Velthera tried to sit up, but the pain in her chest forced her back down onto the medical bed. She looked at the bandages covering her wounds, then at the medical equipment surrounding her. Everything was clean and efficient, designed for healing, rather than interrogation or experimentation. I don't understand, she said, her voice growing stronger as the oxygen treatment took effect. Why are you helping me? I'm not of your species. It could be dangerous. I could be carrying diseases that might harm you. The question seemed to puzzle Dr. Yoon, who paused in her work to consider the alien's words. You needed help, she said. Simply, you were dying alone in space. I couldn't just leave you there. But the risks, Velthera insisted. The exposure to unknown pathogens, the possibility of trap or ambush, the resources you're wasting on a single individual, none of this makes sense according to standard galactic protocols. Nurse Choi Sajin smiled as she adjusted the aliens for drip. We don't follow galactic protocols. We follow human protocols. And humans don't abandon people who need help. The following hours, Velthera watched her rescuers work with growing amazement. They shared their medical supplies freely, never asking for payment or compensation. They brought her water and food, carefully testing each item to ensure it was safe for her to consume. When she shivered from the cold, they brought additional blankets from their own quarters. Captain Lee visited the medical bay to check on their patient's condition. She spoke with Velthara through the translator, asking about her injuries and whether there was anything else they could do to help her recover. The alien commander found herself struggling to understand this level of compassion. From strangers, my experience, Velthara told the captain, beings only help others when they expect something in return. What is it that you want from me? Lee's expression remained kind but firm. We want you to survive and return safely to your people. That's all. We don't need anything else from you. The concept was so foreign to Velthara's understanding of galactic civilization that she initially thought the translation program must be malfunctioning. But as she continued to recover under the careful attention of the human medical team, she began to realize that these beings operated according to principles that defied everything she had learned about survival in the universe. As Velthara's strength returned over the following days, she found herself witnessing behaviors that challenged everything she understood about intelligent life in the galaxy. The human crew moved through their daily routines with a casual generosity that seemed impossible by the standards of civilized space. Crewman Jung Sho Seok from the engineering department would stop by the medical bay each morning before his shift began, bringing small portions of his breakfast to share with her. He had learned that her species could digest certain human foods, and he took pleasure in introducing her to different flavors and textures. When she asked why he was giving away his own rations, he simply shrugged and said that food tasted better when shared with others. On my world, Velthera explained to him one morning, food distribution is carefully calculated. Every gram is accounted for, every calorie measured against population needs. Waste is considered a crime against the collective. Good. Hoseok looked puzzled as he offered her a piece of fruit from his tray. But you're not wasting anything, you're eating it, aren't you? You're part of our crew now, at least until we get you home safely. The concept of instantly including a stranger as part of their community was foreign to Velthera. Society trust was earned through years of proven loyalty and shared hardship. Outsiders were viewed with suspicion until they demonstrated their value to the group. Yet these humans had immediately accepted her as someone worth protecting and caring for. Lieutenant Kim Hae-won, the security chief who had initially argued against the rescue, surprised Velthara by visiting her during off-duty hours. She brought picture displays showing images of her family back on Earth, including her parents, siblings, and young daughter. The photos showed humans gathered around tables, laughing and sharing meals, playing games, embracing each other with obvious affection. This is why we couldn't leave you to die, Kim explained, scrolling through images of her daughter's birthday party. Every parent in the galaxy loves their children the same way. Every being that thinks and feels has value. We couldn't save everyone, but we could save you. Valthara studied the images with fascination. Corvion family structures were formal and hierarchical, with clear roles and responsibilities for each member. But these human families seemed to exist purely for emotional connection and mutual support. Children were valued not for their potential, contributions to society, but simply for being loved. Engineer Otean had spent countless hours repairing the damaged equipment from her escape pod, working with tools and materials that cost more than most beings earned in a year. When Valthara offered to compensate him for his time and expertise, he looked genuinely confused by the suggestion. "Why would I charge you for helping?" he asked, carefully calibrating her communication device. "You didn't choose to be stranded. In space, you didn't ask to be injured. If I can fix something that will help you get home, then that's just the right thing to do." The repair work was complex and time-consuming, requiring O to learn entirely new technological principles. He had to reverse engineer alien circuits and create replacement parts using human manufacturing techniques, yet he approached the task with enthusiasm, treating it as an interesting puzzle rather than a burden. In galactic civilization, Valthara told him, expertise is a valuable commodity. Engineers like you would form professional guilds, charging premium rates for specialized knowledge. No one works for free. O laughed while soldering a connection. Maybe that's why galactic civilization seems so unhappy. When you turn every act of help into a business transaction, you lose the joy of actually helping people. Dr. Yoon Ji-hai had become something like a friend during the recovery process. She would sit with Valthara during meals, explaining human medical practices and learning about Corvian physiology in return. Their conversations revealed fundamental differences in how their species viewed individual worth and collective responsibility. "Your people seem to believe that every life has equal value," Valthara observed during one of their discussions. "But that's mathematically impossible. Some individuals contribute more to society than others. Some are more intelligent, more skilled, more productive. How do you justify treating them all the same?" Ji-hai considered the question carefully. "We don't treat everyone the same. We recognize that people have different abilities and make different contributions. But we believe that everyone deserves the chance to live and grow and find their own path. Intelligence and skill are gifts that should be used to help others, not reasons to consider yourself superior." The human doctor explained concepts that had no equivalent in galactic languages. She spoke of humanitarian aid, where advanced civilizations would send resources to help struggling worlds without expecting anything in return. She described rescue operations where beings would risk their own lives to save complete strangers. She talked about the idea that no one should die alone, that consciousness itself was precious regardless of its accomplishments. "These ideas sound beautiful," Valthara admitted, "but they also sound dangerous. What happens when someone takes advantage of your generosity? What happens when hostile species see your compassion as weakness?" "Sometimes people do take advantage," Ji-hai acknowledged. "Sometimes our kindness is seen as weakness. But we've learned that the alternative is worse. A galaxy where everyone is afraid to help others is a galaxy where everyone suffers alone." Captain Lee had taken to visiting Valthara in the evenings, bringing tea and engaging in philosophical discussions about the nature of civilization and progress. The human captain spoke about her species' history with surprising honesty, acknowledging the wars and atrocities that had marked their development. But "we weren't always this way," Lee admitted during one conversation. "For thousands of years, humans fought each other over resources, territory, and ideology. We nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times. But we learned from our mistakes. We discovered that cooperation was more effective than competition, that compassion was stronger than fear." Valthara found herself drawn to these conversations, intrigued by the possibility that intelligent beings could choose to evolve beyond their survival instincts. But how do you maintain unity when different groups have conflicting interests? How do you prevent the strong from exploiting the weak? "We don't prevent it completely," Lee replied honestly. "We still struggle with inequality and injustice. But we've built systems that value fairness and protect the vulnerable. We've learned that a society is only as strong as its weakest members." As the horizon approached Neutral Station 7, where Valthara would be safely transferred back to galactic civilization, she found herself reluctant to leave. The human ship had become a refuge from the harsh realities of galactic life, a place where beings could exist without constantly calculating advantage and disadvantage or preparing the transfer protocols, Captain Lee explained during their final conversation. You'll be safe at the station, and we can arrange for you to contact your people. A Corvian vessel should be able to reach you within a few days. Velthara nodded, but her heart was heavy with an emotion she couldn't quite name. And what do you want in return for saving my life and caring for me all this time? Lee's smile was gentle but firm. Nothing. Just remember that not everyone in the galaxy believes in the old ways. Some of us think there's a better path forward. The docking bay of Neutral Station 7 buzzed with activity as news of the unprecedented rescue spread through the galactic communication networks. Velthara stood at the observation deck, watching the horizon prepare for departure, her heart heavy with emotions she had never experienced before. The human crew had refused all offers of reward or compensation, simply ensuring that she was safely delivered to the neutral zone where she could contact her people. Station. Commander Kextal, a veteran diplomat from the Altarian Republic, approached her with obvious curiosity. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he studied the Corvian officer who had become the center of galactic attention. Commander Velthara, the preliminary reports of your rescue are unusual. Are you certain that these humans asked for nothing? In return, Velthara nodded, her scaled skin reflecting the artificial lighting of the station. Nothing at all. They've shared their food, their medical supplies, their time, and expertise. When I offered to provide military intelligence about Council fleet movements, they refused. When I suggested they could claim salvage rights to my escape pod, they seemed offended by the idea. Within hours, the story had reached every major world in the galaxy. The Galactic News Network broadcast interviews with military experts who declared the human behavior to be either elaborate deception or dangerous naivety. Trade Federation representatives warned that such actions could destabilize the carefully balanced economy of interstellar commerce. Religious leaders debated whether the humans possessed some form of spiritual enlightenment or were simply too primitive to understand galactic realities. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within 48 hours of Velthara's arrival at the station. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the vast chamber, their voices creating a cacophony of different languages and communication methods. The debate was fierce and immediate, with some delegates calling for immediate investigation of human activities while others dismissed the entire incident as irrelevant to galactic affairs. Velthara found herself at the center of the storm, called to testify before the assembled representatives. She stood at the witness platform, her voice carrying across the chamber as translation devices converted her words into hundreds of different languages. I was prepared to die, she began, her testimony broadcast live to billions of beings across civilized space. My own fleet had abandoned me according to standard military protocol. I was alone, wounded, and running out of air. The audience listened in silence as she described the appearance of the human ship, the rescue operation, and her treatment aboard the Horizon. She spoke of crew members who shared their personal rations, of engineers who worked without payment, of medical staff who risked contamination to save her life. With each detail, the murmur of disbelief grew louder among the assembled delegates. These humans crossed dangerous space to save a complete stranger, she continued, her voice growing stronger with conviction. They asked for nothing in return, except that I remembered their kindness. They showed me that there is another way to live among the stars. Ambassador Zixathon of the Hegemony Council rose to address the chamber, his tentacles writhing with agitation. This testimony is clearly fabricated or exaggerated. No intelligent species would risk valuable resources and personnel for an unknown alien. The humans must have ulterior motives that we have not yet discovered. But Velthara's words had already begun to spread beyond the council chamber. In the viewing galleries, in the media centers, in the communication hubs that connected distant worlds, beings began to discuss the implications of her testimony. Some dismissed it as propaganda, but others found themselves wondering if the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization were truly inevitable. On the mining colonies of Kepler Station, the Rigelian foreman named Kethfer heard the broadcast. While supervising the night shift, he thought about the human philosophy as he watched his workers' beings from a dozen different species laboring together in the dangerous tunnels. When a tunnel collapse trapped 3 miners later that week, Kethfer found himself organizing a rescue effort that included volunteers from species that had been enemies for generations. The merchant vessel Prophet's Edge was traveling through the vegan system when its captain, a Centauri trader named Velkash, received a distress call from a Rigelian transport that had suffered engine failure. Standard practice would have been to report the incident to the nearest authorities and continue with his scheduled deliveries. Instead, Velkash found himself altering course to provide assistance, remembering the human captain's words about not abandoning others in need. Dr. Solana, a Vulcan research scientist studying bacterial evolution on Titan Base, had always approached her work with cold logic and scientific detachment. But when she heard Valthera's testimony, she began to question whether pure logic was sufficient for governing intelligent societies. She started a small program to share her research findings freely with scientists from other species. Refusing payment for access to her discoveries, the ripple effect spread through unexpected channels. A Klingon merchant named Werftar began offering assistance to stranded travelers along his trade routes. A Romulan engineer started teaching repair techniques to younger beings without charging for the knowledge. A Cardassian diplomat found herself advocating for refugee assistance programs that her government had previously opposed. Meanwhile, the Horizon continued its exploration mission, traveling through uncharted systems and cataloging new worlds. Captain Lee and her crew remained unaware of the galactic attention their actions had attracted. They simply continued their work, following the same principles that had guided them to rescue Velthara in the first place. Any interesting discoveries in this system? They asked Science Officer Choi during their daily briefing. 3 potentially habitable worlds, Choi reported. One shows signs of early plant life. Another has the right atmospheric conditions for colonization. The third appears to have ruins of some ancient civilization. Make sure to document everything carefully, Lee instructed. If there are archaeological sites, we need to preserve them for future study. And if we find any signs of current habitation, we follow first contact protocols. The crew's casual discussion of preservation and peaceful contact reflected the values that had driven them to save an unknown alien. They approached each new discovery with curiosity rather than exploitation, viewing their role as explorers and protectors rather than conquerors. Back in galactic civilization, the changes were subtle but growing. The phrase humanitarian aid began appearing in languages that had no previous concept of unconditional assistance. Relief organizations started forming on worlds that had never considered helping strangers. Trade agreements began, including provisions for emergency assistance and mutual aid. Velthera had returned to Corvion space, but she found herself serving as an unofficial ambassador for the new philosophy. She spoke at military academies, challenging young officers to consider alternatives to the harsh pragmatism that had governed their ancestors. She addressed civilian groups, sharing stories of human kindness and questioning whether survival truly required abandoning compassion. The humans showed me that strength comes from helping others, not from abandoning them, she would tell her audiences. They proved that a civilization can be judged by how it treats the vulnerable, not by how efficiently it eliminates the weak. Transformation was slow and often met with resistance, but it was undeniable. Across the galaxy, beings began to consider possibilities that had been unthinkable just months before. The cold mathematics of survival that had ruled civilized space for millennia faced its first serious challenge. And in the vast expanse of the universe, something new was beginning to grow. Hope.